This is the unrestricted free agent.
Welcome into the program. Glad you're here. And I just pulled my microphone completely off the table.
I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do.
Defense, I'm going to tell you right now, they're nasty. They're going to be nasty all year.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
Who knows what's real and what's not even anymore.
When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that.
And LC, I told you, it's all about the tear down.
How about that for a start? Day morning, September 21st, 2022. How's that for a dramatic intro? Should try to go with a different voice, much more dramatic voice. In my head, that's John Facenda, I think was his name, NFL Films. Wednesday morning, September 21st, 2022. I don't know why I'm doing dramatic this morning. Hope your morning's off to a good start. I guess I just heard myself and had to call myself out for that. All right, let's turn the cell phone off. We don't want that thing ringing during the show. I'm a couple of cups of coffee in already. Walked the sister's dog this morning. Got the kids off to school. They're all gussied up for picture day. So things are going well around the Hill House. Jason, good to hear from you this morning. Anthony, good morning to the UFAs out there. DC, morning to you, sir. Roger, sunny as always. Greg, wanted to point out an SEC matchup and the whole thing. All right. Sounds muffled already. Good. Great. Well, great time to play comments from yesterday's press conference. Shane Beamer on Charlotte. Let's start there, shall we?
They scored more points on Georgia State than we did, and they scored more points on Georgia State than North Carolina did. And I know North Carolina's playing pretty good offense this year up in Chapel Hill, so our defense has a big challenge. And then defensively, the same thing. I've got some transfers that are helping them. It's a new defensive coordinator, a new system, so you can see them getting more and more comfortable each week. And probably the turning point in that game against Georgia State was the other night. They brought a pressure off the backside, hit the Georgia State quarterback in the back. He fumbled. They pick it up, and they ran it in for a touchdown. That's 7 points. And then the very next drive, they get pressure on the quarterback. Quarterback gets hit. It's another interception, and Charlotte takes over at midfield. So a disruptive defense and a veteran quarterback on offense with talented receivers on the outside will certainly be a challenge for us, and we're going to have to play and coach well to have the kind of night that we want to have out there on Saturday night.
Any better now? Loud and clear. Thanks for the heads up on the muffled sound. Again, in my little headphones here, it always sounds the same. So appreciate the help from you co-engineers out there. So what do you make of that? I mean, did you imagine that you would be hearing 3 games in that Charlotte scored more on Georgia State than the Gamecocks? Eesh, thanks for the thumbs up, by the way, on the feedback. Glad we're loud and clear now. I don't understand why that is. It's just what it is. Kirby, happy hump day to you too, sir. RL, good to have you guys in. And yes, DC, I saw that. I don't know. I disagree. Let's talk about that. So I was going to get even the clip and play that, but to me, this all goes into where we are sitting here on 2022. And yeah, I'm going to start this morning on a little bit of a rant. It's frustrating. It's frustrating as an adult. And maybe it's just because I've been preparing for the show this morning. I just read about Mike Gundy calling the Bedlam series discussion childish. I read about the North Carolina quarterback, Drake May, apologizing for making a joke at his rival NC State and saying it was inappropriate. And now I'm seeing this from DC, and I saw everything that went down yesterday. Gamecock Twitter-wise, right? Caslin stuff, as usual. And then this clip popped out, I guess. So Darius Rush, the cornerback, Josh Vann, the wide receiver. Name, image, and likeness opportunities have popped up. They created a podcast. They've done 2 episodes, I believe, during the season. And there was a clip that circulated yesterday where Josh Vann is saying, well, not to call out a coach, but on 1 3rd down against Arkansas, there was a play called that we hadn't gone over in 3 weeks. That was it. So, DC, tell me, why is that a big disconnect from the team? I think this all goes into the same thing, right? If a quarterback can't take a shot at its rival, a very harmless, innocent shot, May said, "Oh well, really, everybody knows if you go to if you go to NC State, it's only because you didn't get into North Carolina." How many people have made that joke over so many years? You just didn't do it in front of a TV camera or any sort of media outlet for it to be replayed. So now that it is, and you're the quarterback at North Carolina, you can't say that? Come on, man. How weak are we? Have you guys ever been anywhere close to a football team? There are so many different opinions. There is so much drama that follows a football team. To have a wide receiver who clearly should be very frustrated with his offensive coordinator say very innocently, hey, there was an example where there was a 3rd down, there was a play called, we hadn't been over that play in 3 weeks. Well, to me, that's not a huge issue. And to make it such is ridiculous. Ridiculous. And that's what I saw on Gamecock Twitter yesterday. And yes, I saw this too. Jason, did you see Frank Morton on a podcast saying he was fired for winning? He's like, yeah, we can get replaced all the time. You get replaced when you lose. Or like when I was at South Carolina, you get replaced when we win. Guys, that's Frank Morton. He sees the world differently than anybody else I've ever been around. So, okay, DC, let Craig just writes in all caps, snow and flakes. DC says, I see it as that's outside the team is why I say it's a disconnect. Should he have said it on a podcast? Probably not. But guess what? This is what 2022 is, man. When everybody has a camera in their pocket, stuff is going to get out now that never got out before, right? I think we have to start looking at things much differently than before. Juice Wells, we're going to kill him. Love it. Oh, everybody. It was like half the Gamecock fan base when he said that, at least, was like, oh no, I can't believe he said that. Why did you say that? I'll never forget being in a post-game press conference. I believe it was after a Tennessee win for South Carolina in 2012 or 13. Victor Hampton's in there saying, oh yeah, we got something for Clemson or something like that. Ray Tanner's in the room, says, oh, Victor, no, it's got to mess it around. But guess what? It mattered none going into a game, giving the other team bulletin board material because South Carolina had players and they backed it up. We hyped that up so much. It's so ridiculous. Oh, you don't 100% completely agree with something someone said? You got to make a big stink about it or think it's going to be a massive issue? Newsflash, there are massive issues going on in your college football program right now. Whatever college football program you're a fan of, right now, massive issues. One way or another. 99 times out of 100, we don't get that information. If you think a wide receiver who led the team in receiving last year was on the cusp of becoming an all SEC guy, wants to go play in the NFL, he's been near invisible through 3 games. If you think he's happy with his offensive coordinator, like how could we that's the ridiculous way that we talk about things. DC, old school is one thing, right? Like Nick Saban is old school, but the reason he's successful is because he's not stuck in the past. I'm asking you to rethink the way the standard, I guess, that is the public conversation. That's what we all have to do now. We have to do it. Jason, if you thought that Frank Martin was going to go quietly into the night, you don't know Frank Martin. And if you think he is going to say, yeah, I probably could have done some things differently and changed the way that I communicated with my players on the sidelines, and certainly one postseason, one NCAA tournament in 10 years is not good enough at any SEC school, and we should have done better. No, that's not the way he sees the world. He sees the world as that job was a complete cluster when I got it. Complete. And I took him to the Final Four, and they fired me. And I will never be okay with that. Ever. Like, that's the way Frank Martin sees it. That's part of what got the Gamecocks to the Final Four. The most unbelievable sporting accomplishment I've ever seen in my life. South Carolina basketball went to the Final Four. But guess what? Some of that stubbornness, that drive, that focus, that also kept the program from getting back to the NCAA tournament in a lot of ways. It kept Frank from capitalizing on that too because of who he is and how things ran, and it just didn't work. But Frank Martin's not the type to say, hey, that was a great 10 years and I had no hard feelings. Like, I think I consider myself pretty old school as well, pretty traditional, right? But I think we need to start having much more authentic, realistic conversations. Part of the reason I want to do this show, right? In an unrestricted type way. And it needs to be done more consistently. And we got to understand the idea that when we talk, that 100% people will agree with us, or that even most people should agree with us. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous, man. Of course, North Carolina State fans should not like the North Carolina quarterback. The number one receiver at an SEC school that's offense has been a massive disappointment through 3 years should not be loving his offensive coordinator right now. It's just natural. And to see some natural consequences of that, I think you should feel just fine about it. He didn't go in there and just call out and say, yeah, Satterfield doesn't know what he's doing. Now, that's probably what he's feeling. He should. Yes, Chris, that's what we're talking about exactly. Josh Vann talking to Darius Rush. And again, you guys have got to understand the context of the conversation, right? Hey, man, you're on defense. I'm on offense. Let me tell you about how I'm feeling. I'll give you one example of something that was frustrating. That's their conversation. In 2022, we get to hear some of that. These conversations have always happened, but now we get to hear some of them. And then to make a big fuss about it, it makes me think that maybe we're not going to be able to hear those conversations anymore. And it's ridiculous. Craig says if coaches can come out and say Josh needs to practice better if he wants the ball, then a player can say, we didn't practice that play. Players have a voice now when they never did before. I think that's a little bit overstated, Craig. Players have had a voice to a certain degree, but they have always been forced to stay in their little box and have been advised very strongly, like voluntary practices, right, to say certain things and only certain things, and you don't cross certain lines. Well, that line has moved, right? Or maybe the line hasn't moved from a coach's standpoint. You still don't say certain things, and you don't want to give bulletin board material, and I get all that, but that box is blown up now. You don't have just certain opportunities if your coach deems you worthy to speak to the media, right? You can start a podcast. Name, image, and likeness, right? Now it's looked at from a coaching standpoint as a recruiting hindrance if you're going to stand in the way of your player making money off the field. So coaches have certainly had to change the way they look at this thing. College athletics has gone 180 degrees. The University of South Carolina is paying agents for their players. Let me repeat that. The University of South Carolina has hired an agency to represent its players. We have to change the way that we look at comments and react to them, man. It's just so 1980s. Oh no, did you hear the North Carolina quarterback made a joke about NC State and now he has to come out and say it's inappropriate? So ridiculous, man. The Tonester says, in other words, common sense offensive players are unhappy. So are we. Yeah, everybody's unhappy around Gamecock football with a 1-2 record and getting flat out embarrassed by a team who used to be your rival in your division and is now light years in front of you. It looked like they're in completely different divisions. It looked like an NFL team playing a high school team a lot on Saturday. That's where I want to get back to after this rant. Okay, I think I've yapped and I'm not going to go on and on. I'll continue to stand by my statement here. And if you guys want to get into it with me, feel free. Troy says, I would never had dared to speak anything bad about my coaches when I played. This is the problem, Troy. And that's BS. That's complete BS, Troy. Because you did it in the locker room or in private. You aired frustrations at some point. No player in the history of playing has always been 100%. I mean, if you never said a disparaging word about your coach or uttered a word of frustration, then you probably just weren't being honest with your feelings, right? But now, those what would have been private conversations with all the social media out there, all the podcasts out there, it's just the public discussion is just different now. Or what is public, what is discussed publicly, what gets out there is just different. That line has been completely blown out, right? How many of you just wait until the 6 o'clock or the 11 o'clock news to figure out what's happening in the world or with Gamecock football? Nobody does that anymore. And so I understand that's how it was for you, Troy. You understand now that the world is totally different, man. And I think to pretend like it's the same, like that is just complete disrespect or something like that. It's not, man. That was honesty. I think we have to rework the way that we ingest this stuff. It's like that Caslin mess yesterday, right? So Bob Caslin, former president of the school of South Carolina, that didn't work out well, did it? Didn't start well, didn't go well, didn't end well, but it was pretty quick. And I mean, even during his tenure, it's his sons who would put stuff on Twitter that was, I mean, I don't get it, right? It was clear that I guess this is a kind of in a post-Trump era where you can put stuff on social media and not be afraid of ticking people off. And this is kind of where we're still, I think, in the world still coming to, right? You have certain people out there who will put stuff out there knowing that it is going to tick people off and not afraid to do that. Fine with that. Probably kind of crave that attention. Anytime I see a clown emoji, I know someone wants attention and conflict. And that's what happened yesterday with one of the Caslins. I don't even know. I think there's a couple of sons. And it was in reference, I think, to a quote that is attributed to Spencer Rattler that I don't think he ever even said, that the Big 12 was a lot of really good defenses, and the new conference in the SEC is going to be easier or something like that. So ridiculous, right? DC, each his own. I would have never done that. No doubt, DC. But it was a completely different era. I think to equate what you would have done when you had a rotary phone doesn't make any sense to do now when you have a multimedia machine in your pocket. It's a different way of thinking. Travis, my biggest concern with Josh Vann speaking out is if he went public first before going to Beamer. What are you talking about, man? It makes no sense. How about that? We're really getting fired up today. A frontline SEC receiver should not have to go to his head coach after 3 games. What, we got to look up these stats? Let me look up these stats. We got them here. Might as well pop them up. Try to be factual here. 3 games, pass stats. Josh Vann. He barely fits on the page here. He's got 2 catches for 8 yards. You think that guy needs to go to his coach to voice his concerns about lack of production or his role in the offense? You think Shane Beamer doesn't know that? Come on now. And if that's your biggest concern, Travis, you're good. There's no problem. Chris says, but at the same time, Josh said that it is also on him to learn the whole playbook and know all the plays. Exactly. That's the main problem I have with this entire conversation, Chris, is that what we used to have to do in the world was make our own conclusions about the snippets that we got to hear. It's one of the reasons why I love this show, right? I can play you a 15-second soundbite, or I can play you the minute and 15. When I did the 6 and 11 o'clock news, I didn't have that freedom. I had to just play you the 15 seconds. And in maybe 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after, I had to put that into context the best that I could. But now you could hear the whole dang thing, right? We got 2 hours every day we do it on this show. And we could do it for 2 more hours the same day. There is no limit. But when you're in the confines of broadcast television and you got to play a certain amount of commercials to make a certain amount of money to pay the people that you're employing, you got a very limited time. And in that limited time, you're going to get only part of the story. And then we had to speculate on the rest of it. We don't anymore. You can go listen to Josh Vann and Darius Rush talk for I don't even know how long and hear the rest of it and not have to freak out about part of an answer. Or you can choose to freak out about it and play that little game and feed right into everybody who wants clicks and the whole thing. It's up to you. Yeah, Troy, good point. If I play for Brad Brownell, I would speak bad about him. Well done, sir. And that's why, even as a resident Clemson fan, you're one of my favorites on the program, Troy. Well done. It's why I don't watch mainstream media fake news. It's why it's not fake. It's what it's always been, right? It's only part of the story. It's impossible to get the entire context just by the nature of these shows. And you got to understand, what did I just say? It's a show. It's a lot of it is for entertainment purposes, right? There are some shows out there, most shows out there will tell you you can only play 30 seconds max. I was trained. A soundbite in a newscast is 8 to 15 seconds. That would never be fair to anybody, right? 8 to 15 seconds is going to encapsulate your feelings or in any way, especially with complex issues. Going to be able to really be a solid representation of where you stand on something? Come on. It's crazy. So in that way, we're living in crazy times because we haven't caught up. Our brains, our conversation hasn't caught up to the massive change we've seen in how we intake information, how we take in information, I should probably say. We just haven't. But that's one of the reasons why I love doing this, man. It was never an option. I don't know how many years ago. But now I think it's up to all of us to responsibly take in all this information as opposed to go, oh no, can you believe there are problems on offense for the Gamecocks? Well, did you not have you not watched? Have you not watched the last how many years now? Holy. And so for Mike Gundy's calling it, yeah, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are a great example in college football right now, right? Oklahoma State is ticked off that Oklahoma is joining the SEC, so they're not going to go out of their way to continue that series, and they're going to blame it on Oklahoma and say, hey, you guys screwed it up. You're going to the SEC. Oklahoma's pointing the other way and saying, no, if you guys really wanted to still play this thing, we would do it. Me. Ridiculous. You only go to NC State if you can't get into North Carolina. I apologize for the inappropriate comment. Come on. So what is appropriate anymore? You can't say anything. You can't make any kind of jokes. Like, if that is the most innocent thing I've ever heard. We're talking about college age kids here, college age adults, young adults. We can't have a sense of humor or understand that you're rivals. Come on, man. It's so weak. I don't like to use the term snowflake because I think it's overused and it's taken out of context. But come on. Like, what are we doing? Do we not want anything close to the truth? Because I think that's how it has been for so long with just our constructs, right? Not being able to listen to a conversation for hours on a certain subject before podcasts came along or YouTube came along. We just couldn't do that by and large. The television stations weren't going to put that on. They didn't get ratings off of that. They thought, no, people don't have the attention span for that or whatever. I think the really encouraging part about 2022 is, no, there are plenty of outlets out there now that do long form stuff. And we are kind of wired to sit around a campfire and listen to stories as long as what we're hearing is of interest and who is talking about it is interesting. How about that for a rant? All right, I'm done. BW for now anyway. Yeah, Chris, I now have to retreat to my safe space. I hope you guys understand that this show is anti all of that mess, right? We could go off on Vanderbilt University. You guys see that yesterday? The Daily Wire, I get it. You want to accuse them of being right-wing completely. But Matt Walsh from there digs up stuff about Vanderbilt's transgender clinic, I guess they have at the hospital, and now they took their website down. Tennessee legislators are looking into it. You telling me there's nothing shady going on when that's the response? '22, man. What a place to be. I almost said 2023. Well, the schedule's out. You guys see that yesterday? That's much more of the typical conversation that we had. What do you think? What do you guys think of that schedule? My initial reaction was, ooh. Thanks, Chris. That's why I listen to you. No BS here. Love it. Yeah, Roger, these guys couldn't they couldn't coach in 2022. Urban Meyer can't coach in 2022 in the NFL, clearly. Roger says, wonder how coaches like Barry Switzer, Bear Bryant, Lou Holtz would handle coaching in 2022. I don't know about Bear Bryant specifically, but I do know Barry Switzer and Lou Holtz, they had so much internal stuff going on in their programs. I wouldn't survive. Herm Edwards hadn't been in college coaching since 1989. Didn't work. You can have old school principles, but you can't be completely old school in 2022. You've never been able to do that ever, though. That might be the misconception. Don't get me wrong. I'm not about, you have to be modern and treat people differently because they're much more sensitive now and the whole thing. No, you got to be aware of the climate. But you still have to be demanding as a coach for sure. You have to be very clear about the expectation. If the University of South Carolina football program did not want coaches being questioned at all by players in any public manner, and Josh Vann went out and questioned a coach very innocently, I think, or mentioned that there was a play called that hadn't been gone over in a few weeks. If that was the clear expectation and he crossed that line, well, that's a problem in the program for sure. But I got zero problem with it. Again, it's the woe is me response that I have the larger problem with. Oh, no, look at our program. You got wide receivers calling out coaches. Guys, this is why I like to talk to former players years and years after they've left the program, because you actually get some real stories about, oh, yeah, the locker room was divided for sure, and there was a click here and a click there, or a big-time divide sometimes you'll hear, and, oh, yeah, that guy didn't like that guy. Like, if you've ever been part of a team at any age, you know there are issues within the team. If you've ever been around an SEC program that's 1-2, you know there are problems. On the schedule, Mississippi State should be easier than Arkansas, but knowing our luck, they'll be top 10 next year somehow. That schedule, BW says, seems harder. All home games on the back end. It's not all the home games, but I hear you. Another tough start to the schedule. I do like the return of the game in Charlotte against North Carolina. It's the SEC, man. It's always going to be tough. Craig and Josh weighing in on this conversation. I'll pop the schedule up real quick. I'm sure you've probably seen it. This one, not the easiest to see. This is the one that Gamecocks online popped out yesterday. Starting with that North Carolina game in Charlotte. I don't like it in Charlotte, by the way. It stinks. Neutral field means it's not good for either team. Give me the home and home over neutral sites anytime. I was all for the idea of this game, and now I've seen that they jack the ticket prices way up. That keeps a bunch of fans away. When North Carolina and South Carolina play football, it should be a sellout. How can you not get fans to that game? Well, you rip them from a ticket price standpoint. People aren't stupid, man. That's how. And that's not what the game should be. That's not what college football is to me. College football is, you got a band, you got a tailgate atmosphere, you got a home field advantage. Furman game number 2. Then SEC play starts, and yeah. That's going to be something, isn't it? At Georgia, home against Mississippi State. At Tennessee, home against Florida. 2, 4, 6. That's the first half of the schedule, right? Rogers in on the home and home. Both have beautiful stadiums, BW says. Use them. Watch it be a 4:30, Craig says. Can't stand the Charlotte location, to be honest, B-Dub. Jan, it's happened before. It says it's time we schedule a home and home matchup with North Carolina. Would rather visit Kenan Stadium. Well, you know it happened. Chris Smelly and company went down there. Was that 2007? That was the last win I think Carolina had. They got all the way up to, I think, maybe even top 5 that year, top 10, and then I think lost 5 in a row, something like that. But I don't think it was consecutive years. If you're going the home and home thing, I think that some of that got wonky. Remember they came and opened the season at Williams-Brice, Jadeveon Clowney's final year, and Clowney was under the microscope, and they said he was taking plays off and so hyped up. Ridiculous. They had the lightning delay. That was a weird night, right? RL on the schedule. Looks to me we have a fairly even schedule all the way to the Kentucky game. You get a strong week followed by what should be an easier week. All right, please tell me. Georgia, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Florida. Where's the easy week? Mississippi State's easy. Florida is easy. Easier, I guess is what you're saying. Okay. At Georgia, anything's going to be easier after that. At Tennessee, you get Florida at home. Is that easier? That's a rough start, man. But it's not a really tremendously easy finish either. At Mizzou, at Texas A&M, home with Jacksonville State and Vanderbilt and Kentucky and Clemson. So 4 straight home games to end is really odd, right? It's quite the stretch. Okay, Josh, you're confused on that one, man. That's not Jackson State. That's Jacksonville State that the Gamecocks are playing. Deion Sanders will not be coming to Columbia, bringing one of his sons back. It will be a battle of the Gamecocks, and Jacksonville State is a much larger challenge than Jackson State. I'm definitely no North Carolina fan in any way, shape, or form, but I love Kenan Stadium, Roger says. Maybe the players like to play in an NFL stadium. Yeah, that was kind of the selling point to begin with, right? But I think that's overblown too. You get more fans at college games than you do at NFL games. I'm still wondering who the genius is that agreed to the home and home with App State. We go to Boone in 2025. Yeah. I mean, give App State credit, right? They just had North Carolina there, almost beat them. It's Texas A&M thing. Boone is a great setting for college football. It was 150 degrees that day, talking about the North Carolina opener in 2013 at Williams-Brice. Craig's going there. You got the bye week between Tennessee and Florida. Okay, yep, you're right. I missed pointing that out, RL. Thanks for adding that into the 2023 schedule discussion. So 5 games in, you get the bye week. To me, that's how I look at bye weeks normally. Not necessarily who it's after or who it's before, but when it is during the season. 5 weeks in, 6 weeks in, 7 weeks in. To me, that's when you want to have the bye. Sometime mid-season where you really can kind of catch your breath, can heal some people up, and then you get going on the back half of the season. So to me, that's a good bye week. The worst bye weeks are like between game 10 and 11 or 11 and 12. That's how it has been in the past every now and again for the Gamecocks. BW, rather have a tough SEC schedule than an ACC schedule. Never going to be easy, Ken says, in the SEC. And Jan adds, never easy in the SEC with our offensive coordinator. Ken's only 3 gimme games. Where are your gimme games? You're going Furman, Jacksonville State, and Vandy? Again, I understand the history with Vandy. Well, I think we got to stop talking about things that like maybe you beat Vandy by, I don't know, 20 plus points this year. I can get back into that mindset, but I saw last year's game. So Kansas with me there, Furman, Jacksonville State, and Vandy. Vandy certainly doesn't see it that way and shouldn't. And you start looking at the SEC, winnable games for Vandy, South Carolina pops up real quick. Who are you putting in front of South Carolina from the Vandy perspective of games you can win, especially they went on the road and almost won the game last year? I don't think any of those games. I think Furman. I think there's one gimme on the schedule as we sit here right now, as we watched what we just watched over the weekend. You should beat Jacksonville State, but it ain't a gimme. They went and beat Florida State. Was it 2 years ago? Something like that? Last year? So with that being said, let's get into a few more Shane Beamer comments. 1 year Vandy's going to beat us. They beat Steve Spurrier twice, man. Let's not act like it's never happened before or just can't happen or South Carolina is some upper echelon SEC program right now. It's just not. And speaking of that, Interesting stuff from Shane Beamer yesterday. Let's go with the offense. And we'll go in chronological order here in how it was said in the press conference to be as fair as possible. So talking about some offensive issues and where Carolina is going into the Charlotte game after the 48-7 loss against Georgia. I don't think I ever heard this before. I'm not sure if he explains it in this clip. I think he does, actually, where the team came together to review the film as opposed to watching it in position groups of the offense anyway. Here's Shane Beamer, yesterday's press conference, talking about coming off the Georgia game, going into the Charlotte game.
Our guys see it. On Sunday, we sat in that room next door. The entire offense did, every position, every coach. And normally we break up into position groups and watch the tape. But sat in there as an offense and went through however many plays we were out there offensively, 70, I think, the other day, or close to 70, and went through every play. And because to allow every player in that room to see how close we are, that, we've got guys open and we're close to popping runs and things like that. And it's not moral victories by any stretch of the imagination, but I think our guys saw the way that we even though it didn't look like it by any stretch of the imagination, it was nowhere near good enough. I did feel like we made some improvement. Now we just these plays are there to be made. We got to make them. And we're not doing that enough right now.
Fascinating to hear that from Shane Beamer yesterday. I want to hear what you guys have to say about that, and I want to play one more comment first, and then we'll get into it. First, I don't want to skip over all you guys' comments. Troy says, and I think it's fair, I would say pretty sure wins, not gimmies. I would say must wins from the South Carolina perspective, but not gimmies. Chris says, I was there for that Benny game where we were ranked number 6 and lost to them in every game after that. Ugh. Josh, fair. We used to think Kentucky was a gimme. Today, you can't assume any SEC game is a gimme, honestly. Roger says, let's hope history doesn't repeat itself with Furman, 1982, low point in South Carolina history. Don't think it happens next year, though. Good point. Ken's Oregon State beaten Oregon once in the last 20 years. I don't know where that came from. Oh, streaks don't last forever. There you go. Even Oregon State, then Troy pointing that one out. This is kind of where I was getting to, Craig. You just reacted to hearing Shane Beamer. We were close to not getting beat 48-7. When was the last time we played North Carolina and Charlotte at night? Brian wants to point out. I feel like this game should be a primetime game. Hey, man, both programs got a long ways to go to be a primetime game in week number 1 right now. Craig, close to popping runs. I must have been watching a different game. Okay, let's hear more then about Shane Beamer here about his offense and how he's kind of evaluating it after the Georgia game.
I think it's a process, and I do believe we're close. I know we're not as far away as it looked, on Saturday. And that's the frustrating thing. And I know every coach says that, we had this guy open and we had this play to be made and this run was there if this guy had just done that and woulda, coulda, shoulda. I mean, I'm not one of those guys, but you do see the tape that that there's opportunities out there to be made. And to me, it's just go right back out there on that practice field and go right back to work and continue to try and get better. And that's the only answer, that I know. You just don't flip a switch and turn it on Saturday. Otherwise, we would have done that last week.
I don't know how to initially respond any other way than hearing that. I think that's tough for Gamecock fans to hear. Seeing some of your preliminary comments. I think that's kind of what you have to say if you're Shane Beamer right now. But I try to, when I listen to a head coach, especially a South Carolina head coach, then I try to think, oh, well, how would another coach have responded to this point? Like Will Muschamp would have been defensive and on edge in a lot of ways, I think, after a game like Georgia and then going into the next game, especially having brought his offensive baggage in, right? And that's just kind of how he pretty much was with media in a lot of ways in general, or anytime anything was questioned with how his program was handling things, going about things. John says, I mean, he's not wrong. What part, John? Because I think the close part is the really difficult part for Gamecock fans to hear. And you don't just flip a switch. I think a lot of Gamecock fans were hoping that switch got flipped in the bowl game, that Marcus Satterfield found something that was repeatable, that could be consistent, that would give the Gamecock offense an identity. Then you add in a much more talented quarterback, and that would only get better. But now to hear that, okay, John, that you don't just flip a switch, I hear you, but Kansas's offense has pretty much flipped a switch, right? Because they brought in a new coach. Southern Cal's offense has flipped a switch because they brought in a new coach. And it didn't just happen because there was a different guy there. It happened because there was a different system there. So I get it. You can't just flip a switch with the same person calling the plays. But that close, hearing they're closer than it appeared, I think that might be acceptable if we had only seen games 2 and games 3. When it's against Arkansas and Georgia, I think you can accept that, hey, maybe this offense is closer to being a good offense than it appears. But when Georgia State's in the mix and you got outgained in that game, you got 306 total yards of offense, I think. When you got whipped on the perimeter by a Sun Belt team, by Georgia State in the opener, that doesn't sound close. Yeah, John, no doubt it is year 2 under Shane Beamer. Trying to zoom out, get perspective here. 1 and 2 is what I thought South Carolina football would be after 3 games in year 2 of Shane Beamer. I didn't think they'd be 7-6 in year number 1. I thought they would be 5-7. So I'm not trying to put unrealistic expectations. I'm trying to discuss what we just heard about a coach's perception of his offense and its identity, its ability to produce, saying that they're close. We would never have heard that from Steve Spurrier, right? It would be extreme frustration. It would be, yeah, we're going to try some different guys. Yeah, we got to run some different plays. We got to do something different. Because what we're doing ain't working. He would have never said they're close. Yeah, he would have probably tried a different quarterback by now, right? Yeah, we're gonna start Luke. Yep, John, I'm with you. We are where I thought we'd be, 1 and 2. But no way you thought South Carolina's numbers, other stats would be where they are, right? We got to have some nuance in this conversation, John. National numbers. Sports Talk Media Network did this the other day on their handle. 100 plus in nearly every important category in football. Total offense, scoring offense, total defense, scoring defense, rushing offense, rushing defense, third down conversions, turnovers. There's only 131 teams that play. 127, 125, 124, 123. And I thought, I don't know about you, John, I thought we would continue to see some improvement. I know last year, even 7-6, right? Last year, there were some bad games. The offense was not good. But I thought we were going to see that gap closed a little bit, more competitiveness against a team like Georgia. Because Georgia changed from last year to this year too, but it doesn't look like they dropped off from that national championship level at all, right? And I get it. Kirby Smart's been there a lot longer than Shane Beamer. I understand where they are in the program. But how the offense was just talked about, to me, massive concern. Close. We all watched. We're close. And I guess that's what you got to do after something like that. Kens, thanks, man. Really appreciate you being a part of the show. Good luck at work today, sir. DC says without the 2 block punts, we could be 0-3. I think some of what Shane is saying, Troy says, has keeping some confidence for the team in mind. Look, if your team's that fragile, you got the wrong guys. You really do. Kids, and again, these are young adults. So just coaching kids are the best. Being around kids, mine are 9 and 7, the older two. They know the difference between real confidence and belief and just words. And they have to see some results to really gain confidence. I don't know if close does it, man. I just don't. Picks. I'm tired of hearing we're close. Well, that's the thing. Hearing you're close and watching what we saw, that's the difficult part. And I get it. We watch it differently than coaches. And coaches have to watch it differently. And you do have to trust the process. And you can't just freak out and hit the panic button and start firing everybody and think just because you change something, it's going to get better. You can't do that. So I understand the position Shane finds himself in. And you do want your coach to be above the storm, right? The calm in the storm. You do want, Aaron Rodgers came to mind saying that, like, relax. It's going to be okay. But Aaron Rodgers had already proven a bunch, right? I think Shane Beamer has proven at South Carolina that he can be a good head coach, that he was an excellent head coach in year number 1, that he seems to be an excellent program builder. But what he hasn't proven is that his offense can be a respectable SEC offense. And that, I think that's the first step, right? Get respectable, man. Saturday wasn't respectable on any level. Kai Kroger was respectable. Nick Imanwari as a true freshman safety, respectable. Outside of that, it was embarrassing. So that's not close, right? I get it. You can be close to making a play if you would not have gotten tripped up by that tackle, and it could say, hey, man, this was the right play call, because if you beat this guy one-on-one, instead of a 2-yard gain, it's going to be 20-plus yards. But, man, Chris says they're kids to you if you're old enough to be their parents. That's a good way to put it. But then I'm going to call a lot of people kids here as I move forward in life at 44. Josh, heck, Georgia could be better this year than last year, which is hard to believe. Their defense didn't drop off hardly at all. We're the only team who scored a touchdown on them. Easy, Josh. I mean, the Oregon performance was amazing. But then they played who? Mercer or Samford? I get those confused. And they played really well against South Carolina. But it's still early. And South Carolina, in my mind, doesn't even really get credit for scoring a touchdown on them. Final minute, you're down 48-0. Troy, Georgia's good, but too early for that talk as well. So you're with me. All right, John says, maybe I'm in the minority, but what did people expect to happen against Georgia? I expected us to get killed. Understood, John. I expected, again, the gap between defending national champ, number 1 team in the country, and South Carolina, game number 3, year number 2. I expected it. I didn't expect it to be as wide as it clearly was. And it's wider than it's ever been between Georgia and South Carolina. I think it was the largest margin of loss South Carolina's ever had, maybe second largest. but to do it at home in a game where you're asking fans and fans delivered, right, to show up at noon. Big recruiting weekend. And Shane talked about it yesterday, how recruits, all they wanted to talk about was how fans showed up and the environment and the whole thing, which I think is kind of what you got to say in his position, right? And that would be awfully disrespectful if you're a recruit and you're talking about, hey, man, why are you guys down 48-0? Like, what are you guys doing? Right? That's not how these recruiting visits go. I'm guessing that's how conversations on the way home went, though, to some degree at least. I mean, that's the thing. I was talking to my dad. My dad's always reading the recruiting recaps. I'm like, well, what did you expect it to be, right? Of course, you get the positive reviews of these. I've never read one. Never. Any recruiting recap ever about an official visit and say, yeah, it didn't go so well. I didn't really like it there. And John, that Shane Beamer knows it. You need 5-star guys. You need a 5-star guy like Nicholas Harbor. You need as many as you can get. And that's the only real way you're going to close the gap significantly between South Carolina and Georgia right now. Bring in the best offensive coordinator, most proven guy, whatever you want to do. You can only do so much with a distinct disadvantage of talent. Hopefully they got Harbor to Hall's Chop House right after 2001, Craig says. Yeah, man, I can't imagine being in charge of that recruiting visit. Shane Beamer certainly has built up a bunch of goodwill. Can you imagine Will Muschamp saying, yeah, we're close? He would have gotten completely crushed after that press conference. Could never have gotten away with that. What, after the Texas A&M whipping at Williams-Brice, saying, no, we got the offense together. We're close, guys. Close to making plays. How about this on the offensive line? I thought was an interesting take from Shane Beamer.
I thought they played really, really well, and nobody's talking about that for sure. Now, did we win the game? Did we play well on offense? No. Do we have moral victories because, we didn't have a ton of sacks? No. But I think if you look at it, I mean, we lined up and we were able to pop some runs in there where we're a shoestring tackle away from popping a couple of them. And I think Georgia had, one sack, I think, or none. So we protected the quarterback for the most part. Did we get some pressure? Yes. And Spencer, to his, Spencer will tell you this too, like he's got to step up in the pocket. And some of those times on Saturday that Spencer was drifting backwards, he knows this. I'm not telling you anything we haven't already talked about, but we'd love for him to be able to step up in that pocket too, because we had good protection. So missing Jalen Nichols and some guys, Dylan having to go to left tackle, Wanamaker going to right tackle, Trey Jones coming in there and playing some. I thought those guys took a step forward and showed that we can, run the ball. I mean, some of the runs that we popped were the same run scheme over and over again. It was just out of some different formations, and we've got to continue to be better. We haven't arrived by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought those guys took a good step against a really, really good defense.
To me, that tells me a lot about the conversation that has been the offensive line, heavily criticized in the first two games. And I think that's Shane Beamer trying to show some confidence in that unit as well, build their confidence, but also maybe the expectation level. Troy, resident Clemson fan, giving kudos to the Gamecock fans. Crowd was great at the start of the game. What do you say to a recruit after getting beat like that? Kens, it's actually really easy, and it can be one of the best sells. We need you now. Now. And while you might go to other programs and see some big time players in front of you at that position that you're thinking about that you see yourself playing next year, you didn't see that at South Carolina. Craig hits us up with 15 pressures. Yeah, Josh was been there. You play, tell them they'll play. You don't have to tell them that, right? They see it. But you got to understand how a recruit sees things, right? Or how they're sold on things. Look back through the years. Frank Martin's a great example, right? Just because South Carolina got to the Final Four didn't mean all of a sudden all these amazing prospects wanted to come play for the University of South Carolina basketball team. When did Gigi Jackson come to South Carolina? Maybe at its worst, right? New coach, roster in flux, I think is a kind way to put it. Lamont Paris somehow convinced Gigi Jackson that he could be the guy. I think maybe a large part of that is that they don't have any guys. There is no guy. Kins, I think you say we need you bad. Exactly. You don't want to seem desperate. Oh, that's not how it would come across, right? It would come across as you are extremely valued here. And I think you're only desperate if you don't have that pregame environment, that you don't have a fan base. You don't get people to show up at games. It's one of the main reasons that the move was made at the Will Muschamp era. There was not going to be zero enthusiasm in the fan base. Craig says, I'm sure Dabo was telling recruits that in his first 5 years. Clemson was patient with him through some difficult losses. We need to do the same thing. York, good morning, sir. We're fired up this morning here on Unrestricted Free Agent, man. Started with a rant about basically how we hear and see things in 2022. John just wants to let us know he saw that Canada's going to lift their vaccination requirement. So that means for the upcoming season, NBA unvaccinated players will be able to play in Canada. I think it's the same thing with Major League Baseball, and it's not just a sports thing there, John. Just for a random unrestricted free agent blurb. Love it. Love the randomness of the live show. Thanks, Brian. He says, man, I love these comments in this broadcast. Glad that you're a part of it now as well. Craig says it took Mark Stoops 5 years too. We want everything today, and it's not possible. See, I think Gamecock fans are pretty good at being patient compared to other fan bases, right? Y'all know, like fans short for fanatic, so it's never going to be really reasonable and logical and patient and loving and caring. That's not what college football is. But it was the improvement at the end of last year, beating Florida, beating Auburn, beating North Carolina, that fast-tracked Shane Beamer and the Gamecock program. And it got people too excited, overly excited. Excited's good. Overly excited or being unrealistic is not. That has been removed now, right? That has been taken care of in 3 games, back down to earth. And now is when the real season starts to begin. And I will say, continue to say, it's you better beat Charlotte. You better beat South Carolina State, and you better look a lot better on offense, especially in those wins. But you don't get much credit if that happens. That better happen for Shane Beamer, Marcus Satterfield, Spencer Rattler, and company. And then we start to write the real story for 2022 with SEC play after that. Craig, what's your deal with Auburn and Missouri, man? No. Why are you really worried about Brian Harsin and Eli Drinkwitz with the South Carolina program being where it is? Are they concert guys, Craig? I say that with love. He mentioned this at the top of the show. I didn't get to it. All right. It's one of the least interesting games, the least interesting games, I think, on Saturday's slate, but Craig's interested in it, so we'll talk about it for a second at least, see what you guys think. Missouri at Auburn. Auburn destroyed by Penn State at home, embarrassed. For all that, I should have put Auburn in on this. And I don't think the Penn State game was over at the time when I put it out on Saturday. Like, hey, timely reminder, Gamecock fans, it could be worse. You could be I forget who I put in there. Texas A&M fans, Notre Dame fans, Nebraska fans. And what I meant by that is, I mean, clearly Nebraska is a complete cluster, and they got beat by Georgia Southern at home and had to fire the guy who was supposed to be the savior of the program, and Scott Frost. Program's at an all-time low. Texas A&M had given Jimbo Fisher a fill-in-the-blank national championship trophy. He calls out Nick Saban preseason. They can't beat App State. That's a big problem. They did bounce back with a win against Miami. They seem to be headed back on the right track, but they had national championship type hopes. Right? Notre Dame, preseason number 5 in the country, not ranked after 0-2. Big problem. So my point in that was just, hey, and kind of to John's point, right? It's year 2 under a guy who had never been a head coach before. So your disappointment doesn't compare in a lot of ways. Your embarrassment doesn't compare in a lot of ways, I think, to those other programs who should have been expecting more. Maybe Notre Dame shouldn't have with Marcus Freeman and first-time coach and the whole thing, but they were. They were supposed to be better. And if you can't realize that, then I think you're way too tunnel-visioned, and you got to zoom out and understand that your team isn't the only college football team in the country. But Missouri-Auburn, Penn State, not just winning at Auburn as the first Big Ten visitor ever on the Plains, but how they did it. Whew. Yeah, Eli Drinkwitz ain't going to get fired, man. I don't know where you're coming up with that, Craig. I mean, maybe you're really big into the Missouri insiders, and I have not been looking into this, but I don't think that's realistic. Harsin could absolutely get fired if Missouri wins on the Plains. But that's not news, Craig. We knew this going in, man. That was been a very widely reported and understood thing in college football. So to me, it's not that interesting just because those programs seem to be what we thought they were. Missouri not as good as I think certainly Missouri fans wanted them to be. I think it's a very similar start for them than it is at South Carolina. I mean, to look it up specifically, I'll give you some numbers to put to that. Missouri is 2-1, but they got blown out against Kansas State, and their wins have come against, as it's popping up here, I don't think it's anybody impressive at all. Louisiana Tech, they won by 28 to start the season, and they just beat Abilene Christian by 17. But, Craig, no, Eli Drinkwitz is not going to get fired by losing at Auburn. I don't know where you're getting that. Where you no, don't go jump off a bridge unless it's a very low bridge and there's water underneath, and you're trying to show off for your friends there on the lake. But no, Drinkwitz ain't going anywhere, and Harsin absolutely might get fired, but everybody knows that. Everybody's well aware. There's already an Auburn wish list out there from a bunch of people. I think Lane Kiffin was on top of the one that I saw on social media yesterday. Troy says Missouri's got Georgia next week. Auburn's got LSU. So there will be some goodwill for the winner, but it will only last for 1 week. Okay, fair enough. Hopefully this is the year, Brian says, we finally get our first win against A&M. If, and that's a huge if, Satterfield can call a great game. So I want to get back in that Carolina discussion again. I can't imagine. No, I know a guy like Steve Spurrier would not have had anything nice to say about any position group after losing 48-7. So to hear Shane Beamer speak well about his offensive line, a little surprising to me. One more comment, one more soundbite to play from yesterday's press conference from Shane Beamer. This is Gamecock Central's Colin Taylor asking about how games have started. This is Shane Beamer, I think, being very honest in admitting he doesn't know what to do next to get the Gamecocks off to better starts.
What can you as coaches do to maybe stem some of those slow starts, and what can you guys do maybe in practice to make sure you guys start a little bit quicker?
I don't know. If you got any ideas, let me know. I mean, we've tried to implement it with the way that we start practice. I mean, we don't just kind of like stretch and then just ease into things. I mean, we try and start practice fast every day because that's how you start games, you know. So we have a walk through and we stretch, and we usually do some sort of like turnover or tackling circuit and a quick special teams period, and then it's, you know, right to either a competitive period or a team period or some kind of physicality like it would be on a game. We do that. We did it today. You know, the last two games, I'm not sure. Can't remember if we won the toss or not. But I think we did Saturday. If you win the toss, we were going to take the ball the last 2 weeks, which we've never done. We've always won the toss and deferred. And at Arkansas, I can't remember who won it, but if we had won it, we were taking the ball. And then Georgia, I think we did win it and took the ball as well, just to try and get our offense out there and get off to a good start. So there's things that we do at the hotel before we come over here as well. And I don't want guys thinking so much and pressing so much, like we got to get off to a fast start. We got to get off to a fast start. To me, it's just executing.
It's catch-22, right? You know you got to start better. You prepared to do it. You make some adjustments, and then you make sure guys aren't pressing to do it. Now it's a bit of a cluster, isn't it? The problem is you don't have an offensive identity, and so you got nothing you can script or you can say, "Yep, this is going to work," and we're going to matriculate the ball down the field. You just don't have it. And you can see it on film, I guess, and tell us it's close. But I don't think Gamecock fans are going to believe it until they see it. And even if they see it in the next 2 weeks, I still don't think they're going to believe it. And I think that's fair. It's totally fair from what we've seen now 16 games into the Shane Beamer era with Marcus Satterfield calling the plays. I think it's completely fair. If you guys think otherwise, please let me know. You better put a butt whipping on both Charlotte and SC State. No offense to Bulldog fans. Or we're in deep doo-doo going into the SEC. I guess that's obvious, Roger said. Well, I hope you feel better after saying it. Spurrier was and is brutally honest. That was his best and at times worst asset. I don't think it's an asset if it's a worst thing. Best friend and worst enemy, maybe we say. He doesn't remember that we win the toss. Well, Craig, you gotta know, man, at that time, it's chaos on the sidelines. I've been there a bunch of times, right? Used to be that camera nerd down there where right as the coin toss is going on, that's when you could sneak in some of the best shots. The only time you could kind of sneak in there as a camera guy and get a real close-up of guys before the game, because typically you're supposed to stay on one end or another, and the team kind of has its box, and as a camera nerd, you're not allowed to go in there. And so you got that going on as the team had just come out, as the band is still getting off the field, as all the emotion of 2001 is in the stadium, as Sandstorm is starting to blare, right? And it's not that important. Ultimately, I mean, from a coaching standpoint, you win some tosses and you lose some tosses. And if you really remember who won and lost every single toss, and like you think it's that important, then your process isn't in line. Your priorities of the process are way out of whack. I get it. Yeah, fans do put a lot in that. Like, I'm sure there's some fans like, oh yes, we won the toss. Today is going to be different. Or, oh no, we lost the toss. Today is ruined. Right? But that's how fans got to look at it. Or don't have to look at it, can look at it, not coaches. All right, we won it. Great. We got the ball. I mean, because even if you lose the toss, you still might get the ball, right? That's why it's not a massive thing from a coaching standpoint. You got to be ready to go one way or another. And Shane Beamer here is actually being brutally honest. I don't know. You got any ideas? Because I got nothing. Clearly, he hadn't figured it out, right? And this is where these press conferences can be unfair to coaches in certain situations. Like, hey, coach, well, what about this? Like, well, if I had known that, or if I knew the answer, you wouldn't be seeing what you see. So interesting, though, to hear that he wants to get his offense the ball to start so they can get off to a better start. That is kind of saying, hey, today's going to be different. We're going to take the ball. I got confidence in you guys. We feel different about these plays. We know we can do it. We practice better or whatever. Yeah, DC, I think it has gotten to that point from the offense. And it got to the point. I remember doing my old show on 107.5 The Game with Bill Gunter. Man, I mean, I've told you guys this before, but anytime we would play a Muschamp clip, he just the body language immediately would just be like, oh, man, this guy again. I got to hear that. What this guy's got to say. I don't want to hear from this guy. Shane Beamer obviously is not at that point. But I think it's very fair to say, from the offensive standpoint, you're not going to talk your way out of anything right now. You do have to show it. And that's why these next 2 weeks are ultra important. You can't just slug your way through it, man. You really need to play well and get right. Because if you can't do it in the next 2 weeks, you're certainly not going to do it in SEC play. You can tell me all you want to that you were close against Georgia and your offensive line played better. But at the same time, we heard Shane Beamer say, nope, no moral victories. And all coaches say that. And I'm not a woulda, shoulda, coulda, or if this and that and the whole thing. But when you're coaching, when you're going back over the video, I get it. There are some instances where you can say, no, this is why we called this play. And this is what could have happened had one of you done your job better. The problem is, consistently now, all 11 guys aren't doing what needs to be done to have a good offense. And you got to figure that out for sure. So Craig's all into the Missouri-Auburn game at noon on Saturday. I am much more interested in some other games between ranked opponents starting at noon. Clemson at Wake. I want to look at this spread. I don't know what it is. Let's guess. Let's play that little game. You guys want to play that game? It's a fun game. I love playing that game. Clemson at Wake. I think Clemson's still going to be favored. And Wake did not look good last week, which might bode well for them playing well this week. They got to play a really good game to beat Clemson. Clemson's still a lot to prove. I'm going to go Clemson is they get double digits? I think they might. I'm going to go. I was going to say 9. Let's stick with 9. Let's see if that's where that over under or that spread is. I'm thinking the over under is going to be relatively high. Wake's been known to put up some points. I get it. Sam Hartman's in a different spot. Just 7. Okay. Clemson is 7-point favorite. Thanks for putting up with me talking that through. What do you guys think here? Because this, I think we all know the Clemson narrative. I think you could almost say it's an end of an era if Wake Forest wins this game, in my opinion. I think you can have a one-season hiccup. I think that's what last year was. You still win 10 games. That's pretty good. But you don't win the ACC with what the ACC was last year. You want to tell me Pitt's a great team or program? Kenny Pickett was good. It was a down year in the ACC last year, and you still didn't win it. But they had won 6 before, okay? So I think you build up that. I'll give you a hiccup. You had skill guys not perform to the level that they needed to perform to. Run game wasn't what it needed to be, offensive line, and certainly quarterback play. But now you go to a place where Liberty almost won the week before. You don't win that game. I think the benefit of the doubt of Clemson being with other programs like Georgia, Alabama. I don't even know who else right now. I'm just putting those two in there. Ohio State is the other one that belongs in there. I get it that they're not ranked 4th right now. I guess Michigan's probably ranked in front of them, but I don't put Michigan up there in that group yet as just perennially going to be separate from most of college football. Clemson has been that program. Last year they weren't. They're back in the mix, I think, in the discussion this year. They don't win this game, I'm taking them out in perpetuity. Not what they once were. Wake Forest, you got to give Dave Clawson, a ton of credit for what he's done, especially the last several years. Love Sam Hartman as a quarterback, but top to bottom, there's a reason Clemson's favored going in this game. And this is the type of game that during that 6-year stretch, feel like wasn't even really close, where Clemson earned the right to be in a different category. And it wasn't just the best in the ACC, it was the best in the country. So you don't win this game, you're out, in my mind. Clemson, out of there. You're with everybody else who's trying to get back in there. Like Oklahoma, out of there. You don't win the Big 12 last year. You switch coaches. You're out. You don't deserve to be in there. Clemson, right now, you got the benefit of the doubt from me. Speaking strictly just for me here. Switch both coordinators out. That's going to be tough, right? But you promote from within. Dabo Swinney's done it before, right? If there was some kind of massive drop-off after Chad Morris left, this would be a bit of a different discussion. But Jeff Scott, Tony Elliott, just fine. Brent Venables took that thing to another level. How much credit does he deserve? Well, if Wake Forest runs up a bunch of points, I think it'll be a lot. And in my mind, Clemson will be out from this tremendous run they've been on as being one of the best programs in college football. Chris says Wake won't win, but it'll be closer than 7 points. Whew. Clemson covers, DC says. Yeah, I see Clemson covering as well. I mean, I think Dabo Swinney and company, I think they know that right now. I think they understand exactly where they are, the program is, and how necessary it is to play better and more consistently and do it against a team this week in Wake Forest. Adam just wanted to take a shot at Matt Rule. Can't even coach a dog football game. Wouldn't that be more difficult, Adam, to coach a dog football game? I think Oklahoma will be one of those Final Four, Chris says. Interesting. I mean, that Oklahoma-Nebraska pick last week was the easiest thing we've ever done, isn't it? It was only an 11-point spread at Nebraska. It was never a game from the beginning. Easy money. I don't know what Vegas was doing there. They were definitely expecting something, and they got somebody might be in a hole out in the desert for that one. Oh man, Adam's in a bad spot this morning. Let's help Adam out. He says, I can't wait what lies Satterfield tells today. I haven't heard him tell a lie yet. Have you guys? What? Just getting rude, Adam. Satterfield's talking. He's like the narrator at Charlie Brown. You can't understand him. First, I think the narrator, I don't even know if there was a narrator at Charlie Brown. I think you're talking about the teacher, right? Womp. And again, I don't think we've heard. I think we've heard an offensive coordinator who doesn't have answers and is massively frustrated. And interesting take here from Kevin says, remember when we were told how sharp an offensive mind Satterfield was? Matt Rule gave his stamp of approval. I'm guessing when he gets fired and goes back to college, he has Sat's number. Is that what he's saying? So that's where the Matt Rule shot came from. Kevin, I think, and this is part of the deal too, right? And hearing it from Eric Kimry, who sat beside Marcus Satterfield in the booth last year, and knowing how sharp of an offensive mind or just a mind in general Eric Kimry is, and hearing his praise of Satterfield and saying it's kind of even intimidating to see how much he knows or the knowledge and processing and the whole thing. This is not a not knowing thing. This is a disconnect thing. And we talked about disconnect earlier. Dramatic swig of water. With the Josh Van podcast comment getting out, making the rounds on social media yesterday, where he said, not to throw a coach under the bus, but there was that third down play that got called. We hadn't worked on that play in 3 weeks. He went on to say, well, we still need to know the playbook and the whole thing, but still we hadn't worked on it in 3 weeks. Well, to me, and I forget which one of you guys, I think it might have been DC at the time, talking about, well, that's a disconnect between player and coach, or that they at least even let that out there publicly. And my point in my earlier rant was, I understand that, and I understand that's kind of the way we have been conditioned to understand that, to take that in, to ingest that information. But ultimately, it's irrelevant. If we think Josh Vann and Marcus Satterfield are really happy with each other right now, we are fooling ourselves. It's ridiculous. It's just that now, if a couple of players have a podcast, we are privy to hearing them talk to each other, how teammates talk to each other. And I got no problem with that at all. Like, I think it's good to know that information. And I think it's helpful for us in 2022 to helps fill in a lot of the gaps. I mean, massive gaps that used to exist before podcasts and a bunch of other forms of social media and everything else. But the disconnect I'm talking about here is not between player and coach from a disagreement on play calls necessarily. It is between player and coach and expectation of execution and what's getting done on the field. Expecting a play to be successful because 1 through 11, these guys are going to do their jobs. And then I don't know how many guys just don't do their jobs on those plays and it's unsuccessful. It's a matter of knowing what's going to work and communicating how that happens and then doing it. Somewhere in that little equation, knowing what works, teaching how it works, and getting it to work, somewhere there's a problem. And Shane Beamer is telling us that that is not a massive problem, that equation is not far from being solved and wasn't far from being solved against Georgia. And yet it was 48-0, man. I get it. They scored a touchdown in the final minute to make it 48-7. If that makes you feel better, we look at things a lot differently. It's more like, how much sugar is he going to use to cover up the crap, Chris says, Marcus Satterfield talking today. Well, we've talked about it in Columbia for a long time, and it was massively frustrating not to hear from coordinators in the Will Muschamp era. I think today is a really interesting example of allowing coordinators to speak publicly. I think Marcus Satterfield might be able to deal with it better than Clayton White today, because the defensive coordinator at Carolina, Clayton White, has done a much better job in 16 games than the offensive coordinator. So he's got much more experience, Satterfield does, in speaking publicly and having a press conference and being asked questions about a disappointing performance. Clayton White hadn't had what he just had as much. There have been some disappointing games for sure, but his national rankings now, I'm gonna pop these back up, man. I know Gamecock fans don't want to see it maybe, or it's tough to see, but I think it's necessary right now. These national stats, again, we're used to seeing the offensive stats numbers be 100 plus, and that's where they finished in a lot of places last year. The defense didn't, but to see total defense and scoring defense, third down conversion defense, 100 plus right now. Turnover margin, not getting the turnovers. Let's be very clear, and this was part of my perspective going into the season. Last year's turnovers on defense, much like year number 1 in Will Muschamp, made Gamecock football successful. If this year's lack of turning the ball over on defense, lack of forcing turnovers, had been the case last year, the record would have been what? 4-8? Could have been worse. It could have been 3-9. Who you beating last year if you don't get turnovers? Do you beat Troy? Remember that pick six? You beat East Carolina? Remember that one? I don't know. I'm just saying it would have been a massively different story. And to think that was just going to become the identity, that Clayton White was going to be able to consistently year after year have South Carolina leading the SEC in turnovers without having close to the best talent on defense, I think that was fool's gold. That was a heck of a year. Deserved tons of credit for it. The challenge of replicating that, massive. And we've seen that through 3 games this season. And we've seen, I think, the natural result of that as well. Offense doesn't get the ball in good field position. Very challenging for an offense that doesn't even have a solid identity to begin with and is still trying to figure out its new quarterback. Or its new quarterback is still trying to figure out things. And Clayton White with 5 injured starters, it does help with the blame, no doubt. But again, you can't go in there as a coach and use that as an excuse. It is certainly part of the explanation, but it's not excused. And yes, there were a bunch of freshmen on the field for Carolina last week against Georgia, and it was exposed. But you're still in charge of your depth chart, right? Of getting guys behind starters ready to go. Kevin says, after 16 games, though, what is Satterfield's offensive identity as a play caller? What's his style? Well, it's pro style, and it's tried to be balanced. And what it has turned into is ineptitude running the football. I think it's very fair. An offense that can't run the football struggles. An offensive line that has struggled mightily through 16 games. Guys who have shown the ability to be explosive. Jaheim Bell at the top of that list, I think. Juice Wells had put up some pretty big numbers. Seems like a pretty reliable wide receiver. But outside of that, you got a quarterback as well that I don't know. I don't know how we term Spencer Rattler right now. That needs to have some success or to show more consistency. Daddy-O, if somehow Marcus Satterfield could get his hands on Mr. Coach Klein's little green playbook, we can turn things around. So that's the switch that needs to get flipped. Well done, Daddy-O. All right. The honeymoon, Chris says, is officially over. And DC says White does a good job not answering questions. I like Clayton White's press conferences. I think they're fascinating. Just the way that he sees things, so much different, I think, and does it like from a mathematics standpoint. I like his sense of humor. I think that's going to be an interesting one today, and I'm looking forward to playing those comments, talking about that tomorrow with you guys. Want to get back in. I think it was Troy weighing in. Yep. As the resident Clemson fan, I think it was Troy originally. Did I skip over that? There we go. I'm worried, he says. Wake is an old team with a great quarterback and one of the best coaches in the nation. I think that's fair. Roger says Clemson is catching Wake early in the year when they're healthier. Should be an interesting game. Well, let's go back and look too, right? Sam Hartman out first 2 games, I think it was. Nope, just the first game. No, let's see. He was definitely back against Liberty, and they barely won the game. They got lucky. Had to stop him. Did he come back against Vandy or not? So Wake winning at Vandy by 20, impressive. And yeah, that was Sam Hartman's first game back. He was 18 out of 27 for 4 touchdowns and 300 passing yards. Strong on the road against an SEC team. I get it. Vandy is a little bit different than most SEC teams. And Wake had no problem with VMI in the opener, 44-10. But last week's near loss, certainly a wake-up call. Certainly a kind of a look-ahead game, right, in between on the road in the SEC, and then Clemson coming home to the house. Oh, Hugh Freeze and Liberty almost snuck up and beat them. But now I would assume they bounce back. Certainly Clemson is going to get their full attention. Then they're at Florida State after that. So really the toughest 2 weeks, no doubt, on the Wake schedule. They're at Louisville in the middle of the season, then at NC State. Pretty difficult 2-week stretch. And the rest of it is normal ACC stuff. Troy, do you think it's fair what I said about Clemson earlier? If they lose this game, they don't belong in that group anymore of the haves in college football. Let's put it that way, the elite. I think it's fair. I hear what you're saying. They're experienced team. Quarterback is really good, and yet they almost got beat by Liberty last week. And I think we all understand Wake Forest. You got to give them a ton of credit, but they certainly aren't anywhere close to the elite in college football. Was this QB1? I think it was, or Sam Hartman was part of QB1 with Oceanside Collegiate. Never thought Hartman would go on to be a possible NFL quarterback. Thought he was much too small. Very impressive from that young man. Yeah, no doubt. And then getting over the blood clot issue, right? Having the health concerns going into this year. I know a lot of Gamecock fans will be pulling for Wake. And it was QB1. Good. Thanks for the heads up on that one. So not just Clemson at Wake at noon, but that's a great noon matchup. We got 3 really good battles of ranked teams throughout the day on Saturday, and they're spaced out perfect. Like, right? You got Clemson at Wake Forest noon. Then you got Florida, Tennessee, SEC game of the week, college game day on Rocky Top. What is Florida? Are they that team that beat Utah? Are they the team that couldn't beat Kentucky? Are they the team that could barely beat South Florida? Well, they're all of those things. What are they more of? And is Tennessee a team that can step up in the spotlight? Because remember here, who was talking about it? John earlier. It's just year 2 of Shane Beamer. I think Shane Beamer had more to work with, came in a better situation at South Carolina than Josh Heupel did at Tennessee. I think that's very fair. I mean, the McDonald's bags and Jeremy Pruitt, what he had done with that program, what Tennessee had been for really a decade plus maybe. I think it's fair to say Shane Beamer came into a better situation than Josh Heupel did. And it's also very fair to say, with Tennessee being number 11 in the country, that Josh Heupel has done a better job than Shane Beamer. Never thought I would say that. I didn't think Josh Heupel was going to work worth a lick. Central Florida had gotten worse since he took over for Scott Frost. How about that, right? Josh Heupel's coaching the number 11 team in the country, where college game day will be centered in week 4 of college football, and Scott Frost is out of a job, the guy who Heupel took over for at Central Florida after an undefeated season, who was returning home to be the savior at Nebraska, at a Nebraska program that had been every bit of what Tennessee was. Boy, how things can kind of change pretty quick. Or just a few years, how much things can change. But also, Florida comes in and shuts Tennessee down, or at least figures out a way to win. Then Billy Napier, you bump him up, right? One of these guys is going to get bumped up to being talked about as being just one of the best coaches in the SEC. With this is probably immediate overreaction, right? Tennessee wins, they're going to be a top 10 team. Florida wins, you can say, well, Kentucky's really good. That South Florida thing was a blip. Go on the road in the SEC. Year 1, Billy Napier, Florida. They might not be back to where they were championship level, but they're for real. A for real top 15 type team. And you just got to give Kentucky that much more credit, maybe, if that were to happen. I think these next 2 games, Chris says, will help boost the confidence of the Carolina offense. With how bad the teams are, I sure hope it does. Well, again, Shane Beamer wanted to point out Charlotte went 0-3, but they didn't have their quarterback. And he came back, and they looked different. John, did you just apologize for being slack in on the program while you've been in the hospital, man? No need to apologize. and hope you're feeling better. Did it seem like the playbook was simplified for Doty? No, if anything, it's more wide open for a guy who's been with Marcus Satterfield from the beginning. It seems like it was easier for Luke Doty because the game was way out of touch and the Georgia backups were in. Troy, yeah, Wake may have had a bit of a look ahead last week. Kevin says offensive firepower covers up a lot of deficiencies, and to Heupel's credit, that's the biggest difference. No doubt, man. No doubt. And the flip side of that, too, when your offense isn't clicking, I think it exposes a lot of things, and a lot of people in your fan base get upset real quick. Craig says, does Frost get another head coaching job or have to drop down to a coordinator role? Maybe head coach at a lower level? It's a good question, man. That was rough. But, I mean, he did leave with, what, $15 million, I think it is. It was Orgeron who left with 17. And then 12 for Muschamp. Whatever he does, I mean, I don't know. It's a good question. Florida, Tennessee, going to be fascinating. We'll continue to talk about it as the week goes. So that's a 3:30 game. And then another big-time battle of ranked teams in the SEC. Primetime Saturday, 7 o'clock. Texas A&M. How many home games they get in a row, man? Appalachian. Last week it was Miami. Now it's another one. Let me make sure that's right, by the way, before I go off on too much of a tangent. Just want to double check. I have been known to make an error every now and again. Yep, at Texas A&M. Arkansas, certainly a look-ahead game last week, right? Even with Bobby Petrino in town. He's been gone long enough. Nobody at Arkansas, from a player standpoint, cared about that. Missouri State up in the fourth quarter until Arkansas got 21 fourth-quarter points. Gamecock fans, I think, were worried out of their minds that the team that you thought was pretty good wasn't looking very good. And your own team, who you thought was going to be pretty good, didn't look good at all. But Texas A&M bouncing back last week with a win over Miami. All right. Now it's SEC time. Now, Arkansas, can the big boys get it going on offense, get it going on the ground against the big boys of Texas A&M? You bounce back here and you start off SEC play coming off of a win against a top 25 team, and then you beat a top 10 team, then Jimbo Fisher's program has regained momentum. Maybe you can dismiss the App State loss as just something goofy that happens in college football, right? Weren't focused, not representative of the team or the program. Moving forward, you get run over by Arkansas, and there are some ticked off Aggies. And Jimbo Fisher's tenure there, I think the tone of it starts to turn in a serious way. Let's see what Texas A&M has after that as well. Because we can fast forward. I know it's not one game at a time here on this show. Thank goodness. Drive me nuts. But I'm going to be fascinated because this one, I don't think anybody thinks that Texas A&M is one of the best teams in the SEC. I think there are plenty of people who think that about Arkansas. But you can't ignore what happened last week. That was a serious threat. Those things happen in college football every now and again, right? We know they happen. So A&M's favored in this thing by 1.5 right now, just to show you what Vegas thinks about it. A&M at Mississippi State, at Alabama, at South Carolina after this. So those 4 home games started with a laugher over Sam Houston. Then it was App State pulling the upset. Last week was Miami. Now it's Arkansas. But you lose to Arkansas, then you go at Mississippi State, at Alabama, at Carolina, Ole Miss after that at home, Florida after that at home. Whew. I never thought I'd say this, especially after that rant this summer, but it is very possible Jimbo Fisher doesn't survive the year if it doesn't go well here in the next month. Very possible. Wouldn't shock me at all. You lose to Mississippi State again, second straight year. Get blown out by Alabama, who might be motivated. Nick Saban might be slightly motivated in that game on October 8th. Massive game Saturday night, Arkansas and A&M. Attaboy, John. Surgery scheduled for Friday and then recovery. Good luck, sir. We're all thinking about you, pulling for you. Thanks for weighing in today, man. And don't ever apologize for being slack. Ever, no matter what, but especially when you're in the hospital. Daddy O just saying, Scott Frost just needs to buy a boat, a fishing pole, enjoy the buyout in life. A&M entering the gauntlet, Daddy O says. Yeah. You think so, Steven? Arkansas will murder Texas A&M too. I don't think you can say that after last week, man. And especially from both perspectives, right? What Missouri State was able to do. And Arkansas's offense, defense, I think is 131st against the pass. Dead last in college football. And also what the Gamecocks were defensively. It's one thing if Arkansas runs over you, right? But, Georgia could have done absolutely whatever it wanted against the Gamecock defense. But hope is with A&M. LOL. The SEC short joke there from Steven. All right. So those fantastic day. Looks like on paper, hopefully we'll get the games to live up to the hype there on Saturday. Wanted to mention baseball note or two. Braves clinched a playoff spot last night with their 10th straight win at home. Beat the Washington Nationals. Afterwards, there was no celebration in the clubhouse. Nothing. They actually clinched because the Milwaukee Brewers lost, I think. But I think they were playing the Mets, and the Mets winning kept the Braves out of first place. They're still a game back in the NL East. And Brian Snitker saying very much they want to win. What would be their fourth, or I think it's their fifth NL East pennant. Get a chance for a bye in the playoff structure that is Major League Baseball now, where you got 6 teams in each league making the playoffs. 4 out of the 6 will play a best-of-3 series, all 3 wild cards, and then the division winner that had the worst of the 3 records. But if the Braves win the East, they're going to get a bye. That's what you want for sure, as opposed to a best-of-3 series that would then change your pitching rotation going into the next series if you win it, division series of best-of-5. So I think it's 14 games left. I think I did that math right. And the Braves won back down the stretch here. Noon game against the Nationals today to end that series. Aaron Judge, the headliner in baseball in general, hitting his 60th home run last night. Believe that set up a Giancarlo Stanton walk-off for the Yanks. 60, man. That dude is something else. He's having quite a season. He's close to, he's not close in home runs. I don't think it's close in RBIs either. He's going to win those categories this year, but he's close also in batting average. Let me double check that as I bring it up. I'd be rude just to say that and not even tell you where it is exactly. Sorry, sometimes I'm rude. You guys seem to be pretty good at figuring it out, at having some thick skin around here. That's a good thing. So looking up the stat leaders right now, all of Major League Baseball, he's not going to win that one. Looks like Freddie Freeman's going to win that one. He's up at 330 and Judge is down at 316. So I'm guessing it's just American League. He's got the chance to go Triple Crown. And he is leading the American League right now in batting average, just a point above Xander Bogaerts. 316 is what Aaron Judge is hitting. Dude, 60 home runs, 128 RBI. Impressive. And I don't like it because he's a Yankee, but it's hard not to like it just because he seems to be a really likable guy. I didn't know Will Crow gave it up and the walk-off last night. Oh, man. That stinks. Former Gamecock Will Crow. At least he's in the big leagues. And that's certainly notable, right? That's a thing. And having talked to Will Crow a few times through the years. I'm guessing he will have the temperament. Okay, man. Yeah, thick skins being old school. I think he might have some of that in him. Like, hey, something you can tell your kids about. Chris says we scored 30 on Arkansas, so I think A&M will handle them, score much more. I don't know, man. Inserting Max Johnson in there, it didn't exactly really spark the A&M offense. They got issues. We'll see. But the Arkansas defense certainly has issues. But Max Johnson doesn't strike me as a guy who's just going to pick them apart and torch them for 300-plus passing yards. He'll definitely have a chance. And if you can't do it against Arkansas right now, you're not going to do it against anybody in big boy college football. Whether the Braves win the East, I love their pitching for the playoffs, Steven says. Yeah, and I think they're set up for sure. They got a chance. RL's peacing out on us. Appreciate the contributions today, RL. Thanks for hanging in there, man. It's been a fun show that started with a bit of a rant. Mike Gundy's calling the whole bedlam disintegration, right? Oklahoma State's going to go away. That announcement came out. He's saying, "Oh, it's just childish. Oklahoma's just not taking responsibility for taking its ball and going to the SEC." Oklahoma's saying Oklahoma State's just not working with us here because they're mad at us. You got the North Carolina quarterback said only reason anybody goes to NC State because they didn't go to North Carolina. And he called the comment inappropriate and apologized. Come on, man. So the question becomes, what's appropriate anymore? We can only say things that won't hurt anyone's feelings. Come on. I mean, I feel like you have the political discussion, which is, so I see things like how I see them, right? I think we all do, right? This is the line. Let's see if I can illustrate it better here. So no, we'll go the other way. So this is my line, right? See the political discussion way down here in the muck, right? If you don't believe with my political opinion, then I will call you every name in the book and you are completely evil. I think the line should be up here. But then, like, this, how is it in sports? You're way too sensitive and you can't even make a joke about your rival school. We got who are supposed to be the adults, the leaders of our country, charged with making laws, policies, taking our society into the future. That's who has all the power in the country, and they are down here in the muck just slinging it, saying whatever they want. Other side, absolute evil, dummies, don't know what they're doing. And then you got up here, you got college football quarterbacks saying, "I'm sorry, inappropriate. I shouldn't have made a joke that anyone that's ever attended a college has ever made about its rival." Unbelievable. What a world. What a world we're living in, man. Chris says what's appropriate these days is something that doesn't offend someone, which isn't much anymore. Yeah, unless it's a political discussion, right? And then you can talk about the opposite party, however you want to talk about them. Tweet whatever you want to tweet. That is Brad Johnson's son, former Super Bowl quarterback, Max Johnson. I don't know if he's Maximus. Strong name. Steven, yeah, we talked about the Carolina schedule as well. I think it looks tough, man. DC wanted to point out, I think Texas A&M on offense is worse on third down than Carolina is, which is almost impossible. Republicans and Democrats are members of the same club. Don't be fooled. It's us versus them. Well, aren't you doing the same thing then, Daddy-O? So you're just saying anyone who's kind of in the political establishments, it's us versus them, and Republicans and Democrats are all the same. All right, but I feel like you're doing the exact same thing that they do, right? Everybody's got to be on one team or another. God forbid you think about things rationally analytically make a decision based on that issue, not based off of who's wearing a red tie or blue tie. I stole that from Bill Burr. He always gives that one. Back to where did I want to go to off that? I got no clue now. Lost my train of thought on that one. You got me. Oh, the schedule. There we go. Steven brought that up. We do need to, we will take one last look at that. I'll pull it up. The schedule for Carolina. Opening with North Carolina in Charlotte, Furman at home, at Georgia to start SEC play, then Mississippi State at home, at Tennessee, and Florida at home. Those first 6 games, gauntlet. But someone brought it up a little bit earlier. My apologies for not giving you credit. Talking about 3 gimmies on that schedule. I don't even know if you see that anymore. I think it's hard to see a gimme after what you just saw against Georgia, after what you saw against Georgia State. But you definitely have to beat Furman. You got to beat Jacksonville State. You do have to beat Vanderbilt. So those 3 gimmies is what we were talking about before. But other than that, there's a lot to be determined before I can go through that 2023 schedule and say win, loss, win, loss. Because right now you can make a case a lot easier for losses on that schedule than you can for wins. So that's what I take away, Stephen, in general, from what I saw, the schedule reveal. But I think that's only natural after what we saw from Carolina football on Saturday, after laying an egg against Georgia. The people versus the government, Daddy-O. Well, aren't there people in the government? I hear what you're saying. I'm certainly much more on the people side of things. But I think we got to avoid that trick too of everybody's always in conflict and the whole thing. Like, especially like imagine you got a neighbor who works for the government, or is it really you against him? Plenty of rivalries, Rogers says, where they're not in the same league, especially being from the same state. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State should play. Yeah, of course they should. Texas A&M and Texas should have continued to play. People get their feelings hurt. They take their ball and go home. And those of us who love watching these rivalry games are the ones who kind of lose in that deal. Wish we could swap Vandy with Kentucky, DC says about next year's schedule for the Gamecocks. Yes, and it will be a true cockfight next year, Chris says, with Jacksonville State Gamecocks on the schedule. Have we ever played the Blue Cats this late? Yeah, Kentucky's not usually that late. They have been later in the schedule. The one time that I made the trip up to Lexington for a football game, it was cold, but I think it was still October and not November when Mike Rath hit Troy Williamson in the back of the end zone. I guess that would have been what, 04? I think 03 or 04, forget which one. Let's see, this year the game is at Kentucky, so it would have been an even year, so it would have been 04. Right, but Daddy-O, you hear what you're saying? He says, my wife works for the government. The corruption and wastefulness is sickening. So it's you versus your wife. You're the people and she's the government? Or everybody's just against the government and the people actually that work in the government, they don't count? I hear you, Daddy-O. I'm not saying there isn't corruption and not wastefulness in our government, but most governments are a lot worse. So that's how I see it too. She hates it too. All right. I got it. This has been a wide-ranging show that is a great way to finish by telling you about one of the sponsors on the program is Freedom Primary Care. You see that first word there? Freedom. We have the freedom to discuss anything we want to here on Unrestricted Free Agent. Freedom Primary Care values that freedom from the healthcare perspective. And again, I say this, and I say it really honestly because it's the first thing that pops in my head when I talk about this. I never thought this would be a thing. There's something in my brain that makes me say this to you every time I tell you about Freedom Primary Care. I never thought freedom in our medical decisions would be an issue in the United States of America, but clearly it has gotten to be that way in our country. And it's why I really value Freedom Primary Care sponsoring this program. And I value them so much that I trust them to care for my family. They're located up in Fort Mill near me. If you're not near the Fort Mill, South Carolina area, you can still take advantage of Freedom Primary Care's services. Give them a call at 803-627-2447. Telemedicine options these days in the 21st century. Oh, man, it's all coming full circle. Remember we talked about the Josh Vann podcast situation and ingesting information a little bit differently than the old school way? Go check out Freedom Primary Care. 803-627-2447. They'll help you out. They value your freedom, responsible to you, not for you. Really appreciate them supporting the show. Please support those who support this show, and really appreciate your support as well. All of you weighing in on the live chat today. Excellent performance. DC peacing out on us. Roger says, everybody have a blessed Wednesday, with a sunny emoji or a smiling emoji instead of the sunny one. Good show as usual, Chris says. Have a good day, Tim. Fellow Gamecocks. Troy, our resident tater. Go Cox. Attaboy, Chris. Way to work everybody in there. Thanks for listening, watching, however you did it, whenever you did it. Please feel free to subscribe, comment, like, help grow the show in any way that you can. That is greatly appreciated as well. September 21st, 2022 edition now in the books. America, Daddy-O ends us with here on Unrestricted Free Agent.